All right, ACC championship, Clemson and North Carolina. We've got Clemson 7.5, 8-point favorite, 63 the total. Now, this is a neutral field game, but it's Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte. It's still pretty damn close to North Carolina's campus, Chapel Hill. So, but again, Clemson is South Carolina, but they'll travel a ton. Obviously, it's Clemson. It's obviously a very passionate fan base. I'm sure they'll have a great turnout, but so will North Carolina. You'll see a lot of baby blue, I'm sure, in the crowd for the Tar Heels in this one. When it comes to this Clemson Tigers team, I worry about where they're at a little bit after losing to South Carolina last week. I mean, that was not a good performance, especially on defense, where Spencer Rattler had some mistakes, 2 interceptions, but he also had another good passing game in terms of moving the team, 360 passing yards, a good completion rate, 2 touchdowns. He did have more mistakes than he had against Tennessee, when he just had this almost perfect game against the Volunteers 2 weeks ago through the air. But the fact that Clemson gave up 360 passing yards in that game to South Carolina and Spencer Rattler, that is absolutely concerning against Drake May. Drake May can spin it. Drake May can throw the football in this game. And we have seen this before with Clemson. Their secondary, Sam Hartman and Wake did a number on that secondary earlier this year, even though Clemson was fortunate enough in that game to escape in overtime. You saw in the Florida State game, it was a good game moving the football through the air for the Noles, even though, again, Clemson escaped in that game. Syracuse, was able to have some success through the air, and they're not even the best passing attack ever. Notre Dame, same thing. I mean, this secondary is the weak link of the defense, and they've been exposed a little bit at times this year. The D-line is still very good. They're pretty stout against the run, but you can throw on Clemson's defense. You can absolutely throw on Clemson's defense, and that's the strength of North Carolina's offense. Drake May in the passing game, 8th in the country in terms of passing yards per game this year for the North Carolina Tar Heels. In fact, averaging a pretty good 273 or 320 rather passing yards per game for them. And in terms of yards per pass attempt, 8.6 and 12.9 per completion. So they are also capable of getting some big plays through the air. They've got an excellent trio of receivers. One of them's questionable, Antoine Green. He didn't play against last week. We'll see if he's in there today, next week in the championship game. He's questionable. Gavin Blackwell, and of course Josh Downs, who is absolutely magnificent receiver for the North Carolina Tar Heels. That's a lot of weapons for a secondary that's shown more than their share of holes and warts throughout the course of the season. So I think this ends up actually, believe it or not, turning into a bit of a shootout, much like we saw with Clemson, South Carolina. And that's another parallel here in this game. Clemson plays a bit of an up-tempo, potent passing attack. That's when their games have kind of gone over the total. The Wake Forest game, 51-45. Florida State got to 62 points. South Carolina last week, they ended up with 61 points. In that game, went over the total. So I definitely would be interested in the over here in this game. And, more than 7, I'm not laying more than 7 with the Clemson Tigers in this game. Not willing to do that because of that main matchup issue that I have with Clemson going into this game, and that is that weakened, struggling secondary going up against, the strength of North Carolina, which is throwing the football. Now, you could flip it around and say, you know what? North Carolina defense is still shaky. And I agree with that. There's no question. This should be an opportunity for DJ Uiagalelei to have success. He only had 99 passing yards. That's the concern here as well. I mean, the passing game was almost non-existent against South Carolina last week. 8 of 29, 99 passing yards. Their offense was Will Shipley running the football. That's about it. 132 rushing yards in that game against South Carolina. They really didn't do squat throwing the football. That's going to have to change here in this game. The good news for Clemson is that North Carolina's run defense does give up close to 170 per game on the ground, 89th in the country in rushing yards per game. So I think there's points both ways in this game. I like the total more than the side, but certainly from a side perspective, I'm leaning North Carolina here. I don't know if Clemson's in the right frame of mind, psyche. They've now lost multiple games. They're not even in the, they're not even in the playoff conversation now. You got to work. I know the ACC championship is still something you want to win, but this team's used to being in the playoffs and being in the national championship hunt. They're not even in that. And are they going to have that enthusiasm here? And quite frankly, are they going to have the secondary to win this game by more than a touchdown? I'm not so sure. Connor, what do you think here? ACC title game.
Yeah, I'm not so sure either. But this team, the defense has played well in spurts, in spots, this Clemson. And they do have the better defense in the end. So, but do I want to lay 7.5 with them? Not really, not after watching last week. On the other side, North Carolina, you can never lay points with them. And that offense, May's been very good, but the last 2 weeks, they've struggled. The Georgia Tech game, they didn't do well. They had 24 before it went to OT, I believe. I think, against NC State, but still lost. We always say North Carolina lay points. Don't do it with that bad defense. Now they're catching the touchdown. I don't know. I maybe they can hang around here. This Clemson team hasn't been the same, and like you mentioned, they're not going to the playoff. Doesn't mean anything. Yeah, they could still win this championship game. So it's crazy to say. I'd probably take Clemson, but I don't feel strong about this one. I think you're right. The total's gone up a little high here. It's at 63.5. I still think it can get over. I lean that way, but I'm gonna look later this week to make sure I want to play this one.